Hello everyone. In the last class, we have had brief introduction to memory management. I'm going to continue my talk on memory management in this class as well. Okay, before I proceed, let us quickly talk about memory protection. What is memory protection? Here, no process should be allowed to access code or data of some other process. In the memory, OS permanently resides in the lower part of the memory, and the remaining part of the memory is given for the user processes P0, P1 and so on, and no process is allowed to touch the code or the data of some other process or operating system. So this ensuring this is called as memory protection. How operating system does this? First of all, the central processing unit generates logical address which cannot be used in as is form to reference the memory location. This logical address has to be mapped to physical address. This mapping is done by a hardware unit called memory management unit. This memory management unit gets the support of relocation register and limit register for memory protection. Now we have discussed about memory protection in brief. Now suppose a process starts at an address, let's say 3000H, and ends at an address 3746H. Now it means that this process uses 746 memory locations. Okay, so this can also be called as offset from the beginning of the memory segment. Now this relocation, what is stored in the relocation register is this 3000H, which can also be called as the base address of this memory segment. Okay, and what is stored in the limit register is this 746. So any address that is generated by the CPU, let's say 346 is the address that is generated by the CPU. Now this 346 is compared with the 746. We know that this 346 is less than the content of limit register, that is 746. So therefore 346 is allowed to be added with this 3000H, which is nothing but the content of the relocation register. So once that is done, it becomes 3346. This is an address which falls within this range. So therefore this is a valid address, and this address belongs to the process which is running in the CPU. Okay, so this is how, for example, now suppose CPU generates some logical address like this 846, which is greater than 746. So therefore a trap is generated to the operating system, which will display an address error to the user. Okay, so user will come to know that the process is trying to make an attempt to access the address space of some other process or the operating system. This is what is memory protection. This we have discussed in detail in the previous class. So what you will have to understand here is what CPU generates is a logical address which is mapped to physical address by the memory mapping unit with the help of limit register and relocation register. Okay, let me introduce you to another important topic in memory management, that is swapping. As we have discussed, the operating system, once loaded into the main memory, it is going to stay in the main memory permanently, and the remaining part of the main memory could be used by the user processes. I have redrawn main memory here, showing user processes coming into the main memory, and this part of the main memory is left free. Okay, now how many processes are there in the main memory? 4. It means that these processes can run concurrently, by this concurrently in the system. And this 4 is nothing but our degree of multiprogramming. Okay. Now, suppose there is a process P4 whose size is greater than the the free space which is available in the main memory, then this P4 cannot be brought into the main memory. Now assume that this P1 is at this point of time is remaining idle and not utilizing any of the resources in the system. Now what could be done if we have to bring the P4 into the main memory? Then this P1 could be removed from the main memory and put in a special area on the hard disk called swap space. So this swap space is just like an extension to the main memory. Okay, so the process is temporarily put in this swap space. So that is, this activity is called swapping out. Okay, the process P1 is swapped out of main memory and kept in this swap space. That doesn't mean that the P1 is not given an opportunity to run. It is as good as keeping P1 in main memory. Its entry will remain in the ready queue. Let us assume that the entry in the ready queue is something like this. Okay, suppose now if the dispatcher selects P1 for execution, then operating system is going to bring that process P1 back into the same process back into the main memory, and this activity is called swapping in from the swap space. So we are trying to extend this main memory with the help of this swap space, and that improves our degree of multiprogram. It is like now running 5 programs concurrently, so that improves our degree of multiprogramming and hence the performance of the system. In Linux, to create this swap space, we have a command called mkswap that will allow user to create a swap space where processes are kept temporarily. Okay, so I've told you the advantage of having a swap space as an extension to space in the main memory, which improves the degree of multiprogramming and hence the throughput. Now I also told you that even if the process is not residing in the main memory, the process could be picked up for execution. Now if the process is not there in the main memory, then the context switching time will increase. If it is present in the main memory, it is quickly loaded to the CPU and its execution starts. Otherwise this process has to be brought into the main memory first from the swap space and then executed. Sometimes what might happen is that you may not have enough space to bring this process into the swap into the main memory, so you may have to swap out one or many processes from the main memory and bring this P1 in. Hence the context switching time will be very high. Okay, so though we are getting the advantage of running many processes concurrently, but the disadvantage is that if the process is not found in the main memory, then the context switching time will be high. So that's the issue associated with this swapping. And this swapping process, so therefore all recent operating systems by default disable this swapping, and the swapping will not happen as long as we have enough free memory in the main memory. Okay, enough memory space in the main memory. So that is, you can have a threshold for this, and if the free memory goes below this threshold, then the operating system may enable the swapping, okay, and use the swap space. Otherwise, the swapping feature can permanently remain disabled if enough free memory space is going to be there. So this is what happens in the recent operating systems, like newer version of Linux, etc. Okay, after having understood what is swapping, let's try to discuss about one of the important activities under memory management module of operating system, that is memory allocation. So there are two types of memory allocation. One is contiguous memory allocation and the other one is non-contiguous memory allocation. Let us postpone the discussion on non-contiguous memory allocation for a while and take up this contiguous memory allocation for elaborate discussion. There are two different approaches in contiguous memory allocation. The first one is fixed sized partitions approach, and the second one is variable sized partition approach. Before I take up fixed sized partition approach, you'll have to understand the meaning of the word contiguous. Suppose you have different memory locations with addresses like this: 300, 301, 302 and so on. Now these locations are called contiguous memory locations. So when some process P0 requests for memory, the contiguous memory locations are allocated to P0. Suppose P0 wants 4 bytes of memory locations, then it is given 300 to 303. Okay, contiguous memory block is given to P0. So this is contiguous memory allocation. With this understanding, let's move forward and see what is fixed sized partition approach. Okay, let me discuss about multiple partition method or fixed size partitions method of memory allocation. Now if memory is having capacity of 10 kilobytes, okay, then the entire memory is divided into n number of partitions. Let's say in this case we divide the memory into 10 partitions and each partition having fixed size. Let's say each partition will have 1K size. Okay, so on. So we are going to have 10 such partitions, right? So this is known as the fixed size partitioning. Now when process P0 requests for memory, let's say it requests for 500 bytes. Okay, so it is given 500 bytes in the first partition. Essentially, the point that I am trying to make here is one partition is assigned to a process. So that means by looking at the number of partitions in the memory, you can decide the degree of multiprogramming. How? If there are n partitions, there can be n processes running concurrently. Okay, that's nothing but our degree of multiprogramming. Okay, let me not discuss about the drawbacks of this approach at this point of time, but this approach is also called as multi-programming with variable number of with fixed number of tasks. So therefore this approach is also called MFT. Why is this called as multi-programming with fixed number of tasks? So at any point of time you can only have 10 or less than 10 processes running concurrently. So that is fixed. This kind of an approach is used by IBM OS 360, but this is an inefficient way of allocating the memory to the processes. Why? I'll tell you in the later slides. Okay, let's see what is variable sized partition method. In this case, we don't create partitions of fixed size. Okay, instead the entire main memory is treated as what is known as a whole. Okay, now as and when the processes come into the main memory, the processes are allocated main memory from this whole. For example, if a 1K process comes in first, then 1K is allocated, and if a 5K process comes in after that, 5K is allocated, then 10K, and so on. Now the size of the whole gets reduced and this becomes the whole. And in this case, if let's say this process which had 1K of memory completes its execution and goes out of the main memory, then this becomes a whole. Okay, so this kind of approach, this is also called as dynamic memory allocation, and this kind of approach improves degree of multiprogramming. So more number of processes could be kept in the main memory. Again, here I will not be discussing about the drawbacks of this approach, but this approach is also called as MVT, that is multi-programming with variable number of tasks. That means a priori you cannot say how many tasks could be executed concurrently. So it depends on the memory requirement of the task. It could be 2, it could be 4, 5, etc. depending on the size of the main memory and the memory requirement of the tasks or processes that comes into the main memory. Now let us try to take an example and understand the difference between fixed size partition method and variable sized partition method, and see which one is better. Okay, so before understanding the other concepts of contiguous memory allocation. Okay, now let's take memory having capacity 50K, and let's hope it is now divided into 5 fixed sized partitions. Okay, so each partition is of size 10K, 10 kilobytes. Now let's say processors arrive with this memory requirement: P0 1K, P1 2K, P3 1K, P4 2K, and let's say another P2, P3 and P4, 3K. So there are 5 partitions, and we have assumed that 5 processors are coming in with this kind of memory requirement. Now, according to our fixed size partitioning or MFT, what will happen? Every process gets a partition. For example, P0 gets this partition, okay, and P1 gets this partition, 2K, and so on, P2, P3 and P4. Now the P0, process P0 is not occupying the entire partition which is given to it, okay. It has occupied only 1K of the 10K space allocated to it, right? Now how many processes at the maximum we can run concurrently? Only 5, right? Let us take the same scenario and apply MVT, that is variable size partitions, okay. So when P0 comes in, P0 is given, in this case the entire main memory is treated as a whole. When P0 comes in, it is given as 1K, it is given 1K space, and when P1 comes in, it is given 2K, and so on. There are 5 processors like this, P2, P3 and P4. So totally how many processors are residing now? 5. And how much is the memory space consumed? 5 plus 1, 6 plus 2, 8, 9K. Okay, 9K is the total memory consumed by these 5 processors. So how much more memory is left? We have 41K memory left in this case, and we can go on accommodating other processors which may come in later point of time. Let's say if P5 comes in with the requirement of 5K, it can be accommodated, okay, and so on. So the degree of multiprogramming here increases, or you can keep more number of processors in the main memory compared to this fixed size partitioning method. So definitely this variable size partitioning is a better approach compared to this fixed size partitioning, okay. Now let's see, both of these approaches suffers from a problem. Let's see what are those problems and how those problems could be resolved if possible. Okay, let's try to understand what is a fragment and what is fragmentation. Now if you take the fixed sized partitions, okay, assume that you have created 1K partitions like this, and you have processors P0, P1, P2, P3 with the memory requirement. Let's say P0 needs 500 bytes and this needs 700 bytes and so on, 100 bytes, 250 bytes. Okay, that means P0 would have occupied only 500 bytes out of 1K. So there is 500 bytes more remaining, which could have been allocated to some other process, but cannot be done because it restricts, this mechanism restricts from doing that. So this left out space is called as a fragment. Okay, So there are many such fragments in this case. For example, this P1 takes 700 bytes and leaves 300 bytes free, or that 300 byte creates a fragment. So there are several fragments like this, and these fragments are internal to a partition because each partition is of size 1K, and these fragments are within this partition. This kind of fragmentation is called internal fragmentation. So here if you look at this, how much more space is actually remaining here, that is, you go on adding the empty space, 500 in the first partition, 300 in the second partition, 300 bytes, and 900 in the third partition, and how many more in the fourth partition, 750 bytes. So that means we have 1700 plus 750, so that is 2450 bytes, okay, are remaining. Now suppose if we get a process which wants a memory of even 500 MB or 600 MB or 600 bytes, sorry, we cannot allocate this space because we don't have contiguous memory. So that's the drawback of the contiguous memory allocation. Further drawback of fixed partitioning, fixed size partitioning approach. Okay, so there is no way of solving the internal fragmentation. Sorry. So there is no way of solving internal fragmentation. Now let's try to understand what is external fragmentation. So the external fragmentation occurs in case of variable sized partitions. So let's say if we have, these are the allocated memory spaces, 10K, 2K, 1K and 3K, like this. Okay, now if you look at it, there is no free space or hole for that matter to allocate any further processes making a request for memory space. Now let's say this 2K process goes out of the main memory, creating a hole here, hole 1, and this goes out of the memory, creating a hole here. Okay, so what is the total amount of memory now available? It is 3K, but they are non-contiguous. Now suppose if a process makes a request for 3K space, though we have 3K space available in the main memory, we cannot allocate memory because the memory blocks are non-contiguous. So that's the disadvantage of this contiguous memory allocation and further variable sized partitions approach. And these are also called as fragments, holes or fragments, but these fragments are external to the processes, like it is external to this process and this process, therefore they are called as external fragmentation or external fragments. Now there is a solution for this, that is called as compaction. What is compaction? You can push, for example in this case you can push this process up and this process up and also this process up and bring all the holes together so that you get a space of 3K here after those two processes go out. Now this is called as memory compaction. Okay, this is spelling mistake here. Memory compaction. But this is huge effort of moving all the processes up and moving all the holes or free space towards one side. Okay, so therefore we say that contiguous memory allocation is not that efficient, and we'll have to look for some other approach which will solve this problem. Before I discuss about non-contiguous memory allocation approach, let me discuss about different memory allocation mechanisms that are found in variable sized partition method. Now you take the scenario that I have given here. This is how main memory looks like. Okay, there's a process P0 in the memory. After that there is a hole, free space of size 7K. Then there is a process P2. Then there is a hole in the sense some other process was here in this part of memory, but it has finished and gone out of the main memory. So there is a hole created by it of size 10K, and there's process P3. Then there is a hole of 2K, then process P4, and then there is a hole of 25K. So now let us assume that process P5 makes a request for memory space of 1K. Now in case of first fit, we start the search from here and we look for a hole that is big enough to accommodate this process. So in this case, the first hole that we get is 7K and it is big enough to accommodate this process. So P5 is put here. Okay, that is in case of first fit. Whereas in case of best fit, we look for a hole that is just big enough to fit this P5. So that means we start the searching from here. So we go till the end of the memory. So this is the hole which is just big enough to accommodate P5. Therefore P5 is put here. In case of worst fit, we look for a largest hole that can accommodate this P5. In this case it is this hole, 25K hole. So these are the different memory allocation techniques in case of variable partition method. Okay. So we have seen from our discussions that the contiguous memory allocation technique suffers from fragmentation. It could be internal fragmentation in case of fixed sized partitions, or external fragmentation in case of variable size partition approach. Though the external fragmentation could be solved using memory compaction, but the process of memory compaction is computationally expensive. Now to solve this problem, operating system adopts non-contiguous memory allocation method. Okay, so one such non-contiguous memory allocation method is this paging. Let's see what paging is and how it is realized. Okay, in paging, main memory is divided into several fixed size blocks called frames. At the same time, the logical address space of a process. What is a logical address space? It is the range of addresses, logical addresses, generated by the CPU for a process. So that is a logical address space. Sometimes this is also called logical memory. Okay, so they are also uh, divided into fixed size blocks. Logical address space is also divided into fixed sized blocks, and these blocks are called pages. So the size of the page will always be equal to size of a frame. For example, if the size of a page is 4K, then the size of a frame will also be equal to 4K. And these pages are actually located in the frames. For example, let's say there is a page P1 and P2, P3, P4 for a process, some process A. P2 could be located in one of the frames. If you assume that there are 3 frames here, 0, 1 and 2, this P2 could be put in any of these frames. So that is the basic concept. Now in order to locate the pages in the frame, the CPU generates a logical address which will have two parts, P and D. Okay, and the P is used to index into a data structure called page table. I'll explain more about the page table in the subsequent slide. D is called displacement. Here P is the page number and D is displacement. Like I told you, P is used to index into the page table, and then page table will contain frame number where this page is going to be located in the main memory. For example, the CPU is trying to access P2, then P2 is located in frame 1, that is what will be stored here in the page table, and using this P we get the frame number and we make use of that frame number and the displacement D to construct physical address which is used to refer to a particular memory location in the main memory. So this is the basic concept behind paging. Let's take some example and see how paging actually works in detail. Yeah, let's look at this example here. Now this represents main memory. Now let's assume that a process has 4 pages, or logical memory of a process P has 4 pages, P0, P1, P2 and P3. So the logical addresses could be starting from 000 to 777 like this. Okay, and these pages are actually kept in an out of order fashion, in the sense page 0 is kept in frame number 1, page 2 is kept in frame 3, page 1 is kept in frame 4, and page 3 is actually kept in frame 7 of the main memory, and main memory can accommodate 8 pages. It has 8 frames, so it can accommodate 8 pages. Now what is the entry made in the page table? The page 0 of the process is kept in frame 1. That is what is stored in the page table against the page number. Page 1 is stored in frame number 4. Page 2 is stored in frame number 3, and page 3 is stored in frame number 7. So this is what is stored in the page table, and the page table is also present in the main memory. So when a process or a CPU running a process makes a request for some data or instruction in the main memory, the logical address generated by the CPU is used to part of it is used to index into the page table and get the frame number, and displacement is used to get the appropriate memory location from the main memory. So that's how the content of the particular memory location is accessed. I hope this is clear. In the next example, let's see how memory accesses are made by the CPU. Let's now try to understand the paging in detail. Now let's assume that the process has got some 16 instructions. A is an instruction, B is an instruction, and so on. So it has got 16 instructions. So logical space is created like this. The logical memory is divided into 4 pages. Let's say page 0, page 1, page 2, and page 3. Okay, these pages are actually located in main memory in this way. The page 0 of the process, let's say this is process P, is put in frame. Let us also number these frames: frame 0, frame 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So page 0 is put in frame 5. Okay, page 0 is here, and page 1 of the process is put in 6th frame. This is page 1, and page 2 is put in frame 1, and page 3 is put in frame 2, and each frame is of size 4 bytes. As I told you, page size is also 4 bytes. Okay, now how to construct the data structure page table. Now this page 0 is put in frame 5, so therefore 5 is the entry which is made against 0, and page 1 is located in frame 6, and so on. So this is what is the entry made in the page table. Okay, now what is the logical address space? It is 2 to the power of, there are 16 bytes, so it could be expressed as 2 to the power of 4. Now you can say that this is M. So this is I have represented logical address space of the process in terms of 2 to the power of M. Okay, and let me express the page size in terms of 2 to the power of N. Here N is equal to 2 because the page size is 4 bytes, so N is 2. I hope you understood what is M and N. Now if you get the value of M and N, then the logical address that I was talking about, address generated by the CPU, will have two fields, page number field and page offset field. P and D, how many bits are required to represent the page number? So that is m minus n. In this case it is 2. Okay, so that means 2 to the power of 2 is 4. We can say that the process will have 4 pages, 0 to 3, and the value of n is also 2 in this case. So therefore inside every page there will be 4 locations, that is 2 to the power of 2 is 4. Now let's see how accesses are made into the pages which are stored in the main memory. Now let's assume that the central processing unit is trying to access A. Okay, so what is the logical address that is generated by the CPU for accessing this A? The A is in page 0, and the displacement of A in the page 0 is 0. Okay, this is P and this is D. So this P is represented using 2 bits and D is represented using 2 bits. Now what do? We make use of value of P, that is 0, to index into the page table, and what is the corresponding entry that we get? That is 5. That's the frame number. So each frame is of size 4 bytes, so we multiply this by 4, plus what is the displacement? Displacement is 0. We add that to this. So this becomes our physical memory address. What is the value of this? It is equal to 20. Now you just see at 20 what is present? A is present. Now let's say we are trying to access n. Okay, so where n is present in this case? Now you have to tell me. We are trying to access this n. Where n is present in this case? So page 3. Okay, so the logical address for n will be, n is an instruction in the process, so it is 3, page 3. And what is the displacement? Displacement is 1. M is at a displacement of 0 inside the page, and n is at a displacement of 1. O is at a displacement of 2, and so on. So this becomes the logical address. Now I make use of this. This is P and this is my D. Make use of P to index into the page table. I go to this location and pick up this entry 2, which gives me the frame number. Okay, so the 2 gives me the frame number. I multiply this by 4 and I add the displacement. So I get 9. I go to 9, 8 plus 1, 9. That is where my n is stored in the main memory. So this is how the access to the main memory locations are made using the logical address and mapping that to the physical address with the help of entries made in the page table. I hope the concept of paging clear. So I'm running out of time. Let me stop here and then discuss more about paging in the next class. Thank you so much.